For now, I am against reunification.
Other than mandatory military service, nothing really affects me, so I have no interest.
Realistically speaking, I oppose reunification for now.
A recent poll conducted by the 조선일보 shows only 2 out of 10 South Koreans are supportive of a reunified Korea. Most in South Korea say that reunification will just add to Seoul's economic burden. And in fact, a reunified Korea does come with a hefty price tag. Figures released by the Korea Institute for National Unification show that the process of bringing the two Koreas together would cost South Korea an estimated $3.5 trillion. But President Park Geun-hye thinks reunification would be worth it.
저는 한마디로 통일은 대박이다. 이렇게 생각을 합니다.
A recent study shows reunification would fuel Korea's economic growth, making it the world's 5th most advanced economy by 2050, with a gross domestic product of $6.5 trillion. With South Korea's technology and North Korea's young population, a reunified Korea's per capita gross national income would increase from the current $23,000 in South Korea to more than $80,000 in 2050. But all this would be possible only under a gradual, peaceful reunification.
But if there are any disruptions affecting this transition process, for example, opposition to privatization, then the cost will increase, benefit will decrease.
But aside from the economic benefits, the single most important motivation for reunification stands.
Some of my relatives were separated from their families during the Korean War. When I see them, it makes me sad.
I don't know the details, but Korea is the only country that remains divided.
I think reunification is essential because one people should not be living with a dividend in between them.
황성희, 아리랑 뉴스.
좋은 명절 보내세요. 네, 안녕하세요. 감사합니다.
For 86-year-old Ho Kyung-ok, Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, was just another busy day at work, not an occasion for family gatherings. She has been separated from her family for more than 60 years, since leaving her hometown of Kaesong in North Korea for what was supposed to be a short trip to the south.
I didn't know that Kaesong would be blocked. I thought I would return soon. I left in spring and I thought I would be back by fall, but it's taken this long.
This Chuseok, Kyung-ok is all smiles as she awaits to reunite with her sisters next week after 6 decades of separation. She is one of the lucky 96 divided family members from the south that will travel to North Korea's Mount Kumgang next Wednesday for the first round of family reunions. Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War in the 1950s, and time is running out for them to see each other again. Nearly 80% of the participants from both Koreas selected for next week's meeting are over the age of 80. There are still more than 70,000 separated family members in the south, like Kyung-ok, waiting to be reunited with their loved ones someday. But for those attending the reunion, 3 days will not be enough to catch up for the 60 years they were separated.
How they have been, how they have lived. I want to know all these things, how their lives have been.
황성희, 아리랑 뉴스. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to be removing anyone who challenges his power. That's according to South Korea's National Intelligence Service. In addition to having Defense Chief Hyun Young-chul executed, the young leader also ousted a number of his closest aides over the last 6 months. In fact, Hyun is just one of 70 officials shot to death since Kim assumed leadership of North Korea in December 2011. One of the most shocking killings was Kim's uncle Jang Sung-taek, who was executed in 2013. In comparison, his father Kim Jong-il executed only 10 officials in the first 4 years of his leadership. The South Korean government said the frequent purges are part of Kim's power consolidation process.
The government views North Korea's purges as a method to promote and solidify Kim Jong-un's one-man leadership through the use of fear tactics.
But Seoul's National Intelligence Service said the purges have raised doubts about Kim within the ruling class. North Korean officials are reported to have said that one must be ready to give up his life before speaking up. While some say Kim's efforts to consolidate power will alienate elites, other experts rule out any sign of instability within the regime.
I think the Kim Jong-un regime is using shock tactics to stabilize the leadership. Considering that North Korea is not doing bad economically, the chances of a coup or a revolution are very slim.
Experts predict more senior officials will be purged in the coming days, a measure to ensure enduring loyalty to the North Korean leader. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Actually, there is a very famous slogan in North Korea, nothing to envy in the world. But actually, they should envy everything.
It's no secret that the average North Korean is stripped of the most basic human rights, and compared to them, North Korean defector Kim Kwang-jin says he was afforded a life of relative privilege.
I worked at the best North Korean company, which was called Korea Foreign Insurance Company, and it was managed by Jang Sung-taek, the brother-in-law of Kim Jong-il.
However, all this was soon to change once he was suspected of leaking important information to enemies like the United States and South Korea. If he hadn't escaped, Kim would have been forced into one of the country's many political prisons, where An Myung-chul, a former guard at one of the camps, says prisoners are subject to inhumane treatment.
Those in North Korea's political prisons are very miserable because they are jailed, forced into labor, and are abused for a very long time. It's like a modern-day version of a slave prison.
It's believed that at least 200,000 people are being held in North Korea's political prisons, where rapes, torture, executions, and slave labor are common. In an attempt to end North Korea's alleged crimes against humanity, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution last week to launch a thorough investigation on the issue. Of course, there are doubts about the effectiveness of the UN probe, as it's highly unlikely that the UN inspectors will be allowed on North Korean soil. However, many believe that the investigation could turn out to be a much bigger threat than any of the sanctions ever imposed on the communist nation. Ultimately, the investigation could take North Korean leader Kim Jong-un all the way to the International Criminal Court, which could lead to division within North Korea's ruling party.
Sanctions from nuclear provocations are imposed on the entire ruling party of North Korea, so it's an occasion for them to join forces. But reports to the International Court of Crime are made on an individual, so it could divide the internal government and spark a power struggle.
There's no doubt that the UN probe will cast much-needed international attention on the dire human rights situation in North Korea. And for people like Mr. An, the investigation is a flicker of hope for his family back in the north.
I have my mother and my brothers and sisters in political prisons. I really hope that an investigation into their conditions will be made as soon as possible.
Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News. You see high-rise apartments, taxis, people using mobile phones, and children on rollerblades all on the streets of the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. Now, North Korea has recorded 3 straight years of economic growth, although it is in the 1% range, and experts attribute this to Kim Jong-un's relaxed regulations.
Small companies have been granted autonomy in management, although there are limits to self-sufficiency. Such marketization through 장마당 or black markets allows people to more easily buy materials.
But for a real economic liftoff, North Korea needs to attract foreign capital. For that, 10 more special economic zones were established this year, raising the total number to 24. North Korea claims over 300 foreign firms from countries like Australia and Singapore have invested more than $1.4 billion, although these zones are known to have received just $400 million, with 80% of the money coming from China. North Korea's unilateral manner of doing business is keeping investors away, says a Dutch businessman who leads business-related missions to North Korea.
North Korea is also open for business and for foreign investment, but the foreigners, they are not going on a large scale into North Korea. And this is all politics, I'm afraid.
Experts say as long as Kim Jong-un clings on to the so-called Pyeongjin line, or dual development of nuclear arms and the economy, any effort for change will be futile.
North Korea may become more aggressive in introducing reform measures next year to form a Kim Jong-un style economy. But there will be limits unless there is progress and dialogue on the nuclear issue, like the resumption of the six-party talks.
They also note the need for secure legal measures, as the world saw North Korea's commitment problem when it unilaterally closed down the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex for 5 months last year. 황상희, 아리랑 뉴스.